Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr, and you are listening to Fiber Talk, the twice weekly podcast for the needlework artist. And our artist this week, Kate Tume of Mother Eagle Embroidery. Hi, Kate.
Hello. How are you?
Oh, doing okay. Thanks for joining us this week. So many things to talk about. So much fascinating art with you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we could be here for 3 hours, I think. Well, we won't, but we could be. All right. So I got first thing in my mind is, where does Mother Eagle Embroidery, where's that name come from?
It's a great question, Gary, and
Thank
no
you.
one ever asked that question. Nobody ever asked that question. The truth is that so we're going back maybe 10 or 11 years when I was in my had gone down a more, let's say, standard employment path, not creative at all, and I realized I needed to get back to my creative heart and set up my creative business. And I was sort of searching around for a name. There was no name for my business. I wanted to give it a name, no name that was kind of coming to me. And I was walking to my job at the time. I was a shop manager, and I was listening to the rock band Jane's Addiction on my headphones. And there was a song called The Wrong Girl. And there's a line in that song that says, "She's like a mother eagle coming down." And the whole song is like about this powerful woman, I guess. And it just really struck me. I was like, yes, this is my company, my brand, I will be Mother Eagle from now on. So it's rock and roll, baby. That's the reason.
There you go. There you go. We all relate to that. You bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I thought it would be some family name or something like that.
No,
So, yeah.
And nobody ever asks. So that's a great starting question.
Just a moment in time.
Content.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that intrigues me too, in that you had obviously a business world job, and so you're managing a shop. What kind of shop was it?
That was a shop that was it was basically, it sold kind of natural, organic skincare products, and there was a couple of therapy rooms attached to it where you did like massage and holistic sort of herbal medicine and, alternative, I guess, remedies.
Okay, so nothing to do with needlework.
Not really, no.
So and that interests me because many people have moved on to businesses in needlework in one form or another out of a corporate job.
Yeah.
And so how does that all work? You learn at an early age some needlework, and then I assume go through some schooling and are working at this shop, and is needlework carried all along through this?
Yeah, no, not really. I guess it's hard to tell the story without kind of giving you a bit of a life history.
We got nothing but time, Kate. Go for it.
Okay, let's go for it. So, I mean, I learnt embroidery was the thing that happened in my house when I was a kid that was creative, right? So my mum would do basically counted cross-stitch kits, and my bedroom walls were covered in cross-stitches that she'd done for me. And our house on the walls, the art on the walls was a lot of the stuff that she'd done. So it was just the sort of creative expression that happened in my house. And I'm an only child, and I grew up, spending a lot of time by myself making things. So I was always that kind of kid. But I wouldn't say that I did learn from her kind of cross stitch. I played in the box of threads, and I remember one of the earliest things that I ever did was design a cross stitch picture of Africa and put all the little I put like Cleopatra or sarcophaguses in, and kind of designed that when I was little. I'd love to find this graph paper that I designed it on, but I'm yet to find it. So I used to do things like that, and then and I was really interested in art. When I was at school, I really wanted to do well at art, but I just wasn't for that environment. I guess I just wasn't. That was never really affirmed to me. I was certainly supported by my family, and in that I was given, and they bought all the kind of crayons and pencils and paints and things that I wanted, and pads and paper, and I was encouraged to kind of do whatever I felt I wanted to do. But in terms of formal schooling, I kind of I desperately wanted to be great at art, but I was never told that I was, and it was just something that I was always okay at.
Yeah.
I never excelled at it at school. But I wanted to be, when I was 7 years old, I decided I wanted to be a fashion designer. And then I basically didn't really defer from that all the way until I went to university. But I wasn't even making clothes or, I kind of I'm very good at committing to an idea that I have. And I think I just had this idea as a very small child. This is the career that I wanted. And I just went for it all the way until I got into a fashion degree. But I hadn't carried through needle arts in any way, really, since real childhood. And so, yeah, I mean, if I skip ahead, I'm sure you'll kind of go back with questions. But
well, it's interesting to me because you're a classic example of a mother or grandmother planting that needlework in your head. And then clearly I mean, we talk about people all the time who might dabble in it at a younger age, and then later on it emerges as an expression. So it sounds like that. But it's also interesting because I more than one conversation with people who are only children and how they find ways to express themselves because you don't have a sibling to fight with. So, because, some people will have just an army of friends and they're gone all the time at someone else's house.
Sure.
And then others will find these internal solitary expressions. And it sounded like you kind of went that route then.
Yeah, certainly. It's definitely how I remember my childhood, and also kind of inventing. My mum would tell me I would spend hours and hours kind of inventing fantasy worlds with all my dolls and toys, my doll's house and stuff like this. So yeah, definitely like rich imaginative play was a big part of how I expressed myself as a child. But I think, to put it in a nutshell, it kind of got sort of schooled out of me, if you like, because the natural aptitudes that I presented through academic life were not creative, so they were not nurtured by my creative teachers, right? So my art teacher, I'm not saying like I worked hard and I wanted to be good, and art was what I loved, and it was what I wanted to excel at, but just my particular school or whatever just didn't that didn't come out in the grading or whatever. And so my stronger academic skills were writing, and that kind of led me down a different route, which eventually became less and less creative. And, university was also probably the darkest time for me in my life for, personal reasons. It was not a time that I enjoyed at all. And so I think when I came out of university, the thing that I wanted most was feeling secure. And so I naturally kind of ended up taking a path that, I knew I was good at, and I knew that I would be accepted in, and I knew that I could do well at, which is why I ended up in my late 20s, realizing that I just couldn't do these kind of managerial corporate jobs anymore, even though I had done well. And I was, acceptable and popular, and had achieved things, had been successful.
Yeah.
I just wasn't doing anything creative. I wasn't expressing anything creative, and it was just killing me. I couldn't carry on. And it was then that I kind of, the rock gods sent me Mother Eagle, and I just started. and to be honest, Gary, to start with, it wasn't even needlework to start with. I was really unsure, so I just started making jewelry.
Oh, okay.
I'd started making jewelry, so I'd bought lots of charms and beads, and I was kind of just expressing myself like that. It was a really shaky start. And then probably around 2008, I started designing. My first thing that I did was I designed a cross stitch from Grey's Anatomy, a skull own profile, and I did it all by hand. I designed the pattern all by hand, and then stitched it up, counted it, and stitched it up, and then I did another one, and then I did another one, and then it went from there.
But it's interesting to me, through all of that creative flow or juice in you no matter what happened, wouldn't go away.
I don't think it does. I think it can't. I think if you don't, I think it will come out somehow, and or you get ill. Quite honestly,
yes.
I think you get ill if you suppress that part of you that it wants to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. It's so strong that you have to express yourself somehow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the fashion world was not your deal either, huh?
No, it definitely wasn't, and I don't think it ever would have been. I certainly have. I certainly have no. I mean, I love clothes, and I love. I find all that really kind of inspiring, fashion. But the actual industry of fashion, it's not a nice place.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a special person that can live in that world, I think. Yeah. I think music. The music industry and the fashion industry are probably very similar in that you got to watch your backside.
Yeah, and I think it's industry that is the key word there.
Yes.
It's a business, and I think you have to be a very, very special sort of artist to be an artist within those industries and be successful and well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think we've seen that. We've certainly in the rock industry, we've seen that. Time after time after time, where these artists have been taken advantage of, and all they want to do is make music, and people come along and take advantage of them, and in the end, they have nothing, and somebody else has everything off their backs, and it's we've seen that a million times. It's so sad. I look back in the '60s and Motown and all the black artists that were just really just used.
Exploited.
Yes, and it frustrates me to no end because it's just some brilliant talent, but just didn't know and were too trusting. And like I said, you got to watch your backside at all times.
Yeah.
Jane's Addiction comes along and puts you on this path then, but you really, compared to what you're doing now, it sounds like you did not really have very much in the work in terms of needlework skills. Then you had to develop.
Yeah, no, not really. Absolutely, and it won't have been lost on you that it was cross stitch that my mother did, and it was cross stitch that I started me back down that path. And then I made a very clear decision. It was very clear that I was going to teach myself everything. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to my job, and on the bus, I bought and I read all of the Royal School of Needlework essential stitch guides. I started with silk shading, I think.
Yep, a good start.
And I read them cover to cover, and that's how I did it. I read all of those books cover to cover, and that was how I decided I was going to teach myself. And then I taught myself through making work, basically. And I think on my website you can even go right down to the bottom, and there's a mushroom that I made, and it was that was the first piece of freehand embroidery that I ever did. Mm-hmm. And in it is all stitches that I'd never done before. So I was trying out, okay, I'll get my mum came around and taught me how to do a French knot, and then I was away and I did French knots. There's some needle weaving in there. There's, satin stitch, and I did all of this. I had no idea about fabrics or any of that. I just knew that I wanted to make this picture. And honestly, this was just the medium that I was comfortable using. And I guess I was wondering about this, knowing that I was going to talk about it, and I was wondering whether it was because it was the thing that happened in my house that was creative, that was also safe, that I was encouraged and loved, mm-hmm. and it was done in a really it was nothing but sort of positivity. What I'm trying to say is that because I'd never done it at school, I'd never had it judged badly. So I felt completely free to try out, to experiment and to try and to not fear failure. Whereas perhaps if it had been painting or drawing or whatever, then that might have been the thing that I do. So it just was the thing that I guess I felt the most love for and the most comfort in, which is why it was the thing that I was using to make pictures with. Yeah.
Well, that was my initial reaction the first time I saw your art. Was this is someone who uses needle thread fabric and couldn't care less what the technique is. It's what you need to get the result you have in your mind.
Yeah.
And that I couldn't put it down, because we tend to have crewel people, we have cross stitch people, we have needlepoint people, sure. We have all the techniques, but as you go through your work, virtually all of them are expressed one way or another, but they're only there because they achieve the look you're after.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I'm totally self-taught, apart from I did one class in gold work at the Royal School of Needlework quite a few years ago now. And it was amazing. I mean, I don't think I would have. Gold work was kind of the last bastion of embroidery that I had not dared to venture into by myself for whatever reason. And I just thought it would be really cool to go and learn at the kind of world class, best in the world, from the best in the world. And it was an amazing weekend. It was an amazing weekend. But what really struck me was that everybody in the room, you know what they were saying? Everybody in the room was like, "Oh God, I'm not creative. Oh no, I'm not creative at all."
Oh.
So they were full of extremely skilled needlewomen, mm-hmm. Extremely skilled, and had produced beautiful work, but none of them equated anything that they were doing with their own sense of creativity. And in fact, neither did the teacher, because this is a conversation that kind of had happened in class kind of organically. And I was just really interested about that, because it's the same thing as my mum would always say. They want to follow a pattern.
Yes.
And obviously what we were in class, we were following a pattern to teach us the techniques. Mm-hmm. It's a very effective way of teaching, but they wanted to produce extremely fine embroidery, whereas I want to express an idea.
Right.
And maybe because I haven't had the formal training so rigorously, it kind of maybe does free me a bit. I don't know if that's why, but yeah, it's part of what I love about designing a piece or conceiving a piece, is thinking, oh my God, I could put, needle woven detached picots in there and they would look great, like feathers. And then mm-hmm. if I put some gold in the beak, it's going to be this, and that's amazing. I think that's when I hope embroidery transcends the medium.
Well, it's interesting because, for most people, it's following a pattern. That's what they do.
Sure.
And for a large number of people, that's enjoyment. That's relaxation. It's enjoyment, and that's all they ever care to get out of it.
Absolutely.
And then you have this portion that at one point will just start stepping out and saying, wait a minute, I'm going to start modifying this pattern because I see a little different something here. And mm-hmm. then the next thing you know, they'll be designing their own, and it's kind of a standard progression that happens.
Right.
And you just leap to the front of the line.
I just like, yeah. I'm very impatient. That's probably part of the drive there.
But yeah, I mean, you did it completely reverse. All right, this is the medium I want to work in. Now I got to figure out how to do it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's fun. But you're exactly right, and that comes out in your work. Is there's no sense of boundary, technique boundary, or of any kind in your work. It's the overall impact with the medium that just works so well. And yeah. But you seem to have still that artist's sense of color and proportion. All those things seem to be in place. Is that something you've had to learn, or does that seem to just come naturally to you?
I haven't learned it. I don't remember. I mean, I guess I would have been taught those things. I don't remember those lessons. It's something. I guess it's just because there was such a huge amount of years between me sort of coming out of secondary school, I guess high school level in America, and then going through, getting married, having a whole different life, a whole career, and then saying this isn't me. So I don't remember any of that. I guess I'm just being British and going, I don't really know. I guess it is just in me, Gary.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. You're entitled.
but also, it develops all the time.
Yeah.
I think you're an artist. Part of the artist's job is it's just this continuous investigation that doesn't end. I think I look at work that I did 10 years ago, and I see all the kind of limitations that I put on myself and all the kind of rules that I decided that were in place. And now I look at like the work that I'd just done, and it's a completely different thing. And I'm sure in 10 years' time it will have evolved again, and it should. I think that that is part of the artist's job, is just this internal interrogation, and you're looking for. You have kind of the same ideas, but you want to express them better and better and better.
Yes. Yeah, that's something I would love to do with, and if I get to England, maybe we'll do it. But to sit down and line up your work through the years, and then just have you just express some of your early work and how you would view that now. And I think it would be an interesting conversation, just as you go, oh, wait a minute. I should have done this and this because this would express better. It would show better.
Sure.
I really was after this and I never achieved it. And now I have this experience and I could go back and do that.
Sure.
Those kinds of conversations I think would be a great time.
I mean, they're all there on my website for sure, back quite till the early days. But I think one of the main differences is scale. I used to work very small. And in fact, the first sort of few years that I was working, I believed that because I'd been told that you can't make money from doing embroidery because it takes so long, so you have to make it really small. So I was making art jewellery. I was making embroidered art jewellery.
Okay.
And I'm proud of the work that I did, but they weren't. I would say they're more objet d'art than art itself, because they weren't really expressing anything more than that. And it was when I kind of threw that off, which was I think in about 2013, which actually coincided with the move to the South Coast, which is a much more artistic community, that I just thought, you know what, I don't want to do this again. I'd kind of talked myself into something that was actually hampering my creativity to its fullest, and that was when I did the God of Crabs piece, which was my first piece at a big scale.
Yeah. How much of an impact was that move? Is the environment, did that free you?
I think, I was born a bit north of London, and I used to come down to the South Coast when I was a teenager and go to nightclubs, and I had a real fondness for Brighton, the town that I live near now, and the town that I work in, because it was just so, I come from a very small village, and the difference in the artistic vibe of Brighton just really felt like a spiritual home for me. It really felt like somewhere that I could be more fully myself. And so I'd wanted to live here since I was basically 17 years old. When I'd first come down, my parents had let me come away for the weekend by myself with my friend, and it was like this real pilgrimage of young rite of passage. And I was like, this is where I want to be, this is where I'm supposed to be. But it took me until that was when I was 17, and it took me till I was 33 to get down here. And I think nothing actually happened when I moved down here, apart from the usual things of we found a flat to rent, and I got a job in a shop, and I started making work bigger. And then I've spent the last few years building up this body of work that I feel now fully, more truly reflects what I want to say.
Yeah. But when you moved there, it was kind of a psychological just relief and relaxation.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it was like, I'm here, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I think, profoundly, it's made a big impact.
Yeah. So talk about that transition from managing the business, the shop, to making that leap, that decision, after hearing the song, Talk about, because that has to be tough.
Yeah, I think the decision was coming out of just probably a few years where I just was very, very unhappy, where I just felt very unhappy. And I kind of touched on it before, where I'd taken a different route where people had said, oh, this is what you're really good at. And I'd said, right, okay, I'm really good at this, so I'm going to do this. And that took me down this corporate retail route, which I was successful at. And, when people say to you, I think you should go for this promotion, it's nice to hear. And you think, well, yeah, I guess I should, and I need the money, and it'd be good to have a bit more money. And, who says no? Do you know what I mean? So you start doing that, and then you just end up, you've built something that you think, oh God, this is really much harder to step away from. So, really, I just started to think, I just got to do something creative. I just have to start this as a hobby. I just have to have something. Really, what I wanted to do was work for myself. I just was sick of I was just sick of the corporate world. I was sick of the business world. I was sick of the targets and the arbitrary, this is good and this is bad based on how much you've sold. And I just hated it all. Yeah. And I was so unhappy. And so, yeah, that was when I thought, right, I'm just gonna do something. And like I said, for a start, I thought, right, I'm gonna make jewelry. And I make a lot of notes. I don't really make sketchbooks, but I really keep loads of notebooks. And I still have a lot of this stuff where I'd written down all the kind of themes that I wanted to make. And I wanted to make these charm bracelets, and I wanted to, there'd be a pirate themed one. It sounds god awful. It probably was dreadful. And I opened my little Etsy shop, and I thought, right, I'm going to start. And that was it. And it was called Mother Eagle. And then that kind of evolved initially into, again, I still had this voice in my head of saying, you've got to make something small and cheap so people will buy it.
Yes.
And that's probably still, a lot to do with the fact that I was working in shops. So I understood how, margins worked. But none of this had occurred to me at this point. At this point, if you'd have said to me, oh, well, you're an artist, I would have said, oh, get out of here. Like, it took me years to kind of feel comfortable wearing that mantle, like, actually believing that this is my job, that I am an artist and that's who I am. It took me years to feel comfortable with that. So, I mean, at the time, I was still very much had this retailer mindset of like, I need to make stuff that I can sell, right, that people can afford. And that was it. And the kind of creativity it was kind of secondary. So I was like, and then I started making little fiber, like felt ornaments, like little decorations. And that was fine for a while. And then I enrolled on kind of an online craft business marketing course. And I remember one of the teachers on this course, these two women that run this course, I remember having a phone call with her once, and she was like, I've just looked at your other stuff, like the cross stitch, the skull cross stitch that I told you about. She's saying, like, why aren't you doing that? That's so much more interesting. Like, I get what you're doing with this, but I don't understand why you're not.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, like, why are you doing that? And I was just like, well, because it takes like years to create it. It takes forever to do it. She's like, no, it doesn't matter. You need to pursue that. That's interesting. This is just like, why? You've got to pursue that. And it was kind of like someone giving me permission in a way that I hadn't had before. And also because they weren't like your family or your friends that kind of have to be nice about what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of felt like, yeah, this woman has no reason to flatter me. I'm paying her money to help me market this business, which I think is the thing that I'm doing. And she's going, no, that's not, you shouldn't be doing that. You've got a lot more interesting things to say. You should be saying those. And it was a kind of the first time that someone had said that to me. And I listened. So I really didn't know how I was going to make money doing it. Yeah.
Well, I can see that struggle is you come from that corporate retail world where I need to churn and make money.
Yeah.
And then how do I go to something where I don't know where the next dollar is going to come from out of this? That's a tough call.
And I didn't know, I didn't have the answers, but I knew that I had to do it. I knew that I just couldn't keep making the same mistake. And so I just started to do it just for myself. I just started to make art really more and more. And it didn't come straight away. As I said, I started with the cross stitch. Then I was still thinking I've got to make small, but it became, finer and finer and finer. And I was making bigger and bigger projects initially to teach myself techniques, teach myself stump work or gold work or whatever. And then, it was very much when we moved down here, and I just remember going to the pub once with my husband and actually my in-laws as well, and saying, I'm going to make this crab. I've got this idea in my head for this crab, and it's going to be all the colors and all the textures, and it's going to be big. And I just want to do it. And it was like, I just have to make this piece. I'm so excited to make this piece, and I don't care if I sell it or not. I have to make it. And I've never made anything again that I haven't felt like that about. Yeah.
So that was the real turn in the road then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it's interesting to me because you describe yourself as your work being influenced by folklore and mythology and burial customs, but really a lot of your recent work and the stuff that you're showing is all nature oriented. How does that mix all work or not work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the folklore and the mythology, really the thing that I have always loved is illustration. I love a picture that is telling a story, that has a narrative. So really everything that I make, I want the viewer to ask, what's the story, like what's going on here, what does this mean? So I'm really interested in the symbolism and something that can stand for something else. And ever since I was a kid, like lots of kids, I loved fairy tales, but that stayed with me all through my life to today. That I love illustrated folk tales, illustrated mythology. I love the myths, Greek myths, whatever it is. I love any culture's stories that they've carried with them through hundreds of years. And I just find it so inspirational, and it fits in with the work that I'm making currently, because what are the stories that we're telling now? Are we still telling? Do we have new stories? Will we have the same stories in 100 years? Will there be stories about these animals that will be extinct then? Will they matter? If they matter, why aren't we telling their stories, basically? Yeah. So it's really portraiture, and when I pick a subject, it's usually with a lot of research, and it's like I've currently just finished a piece, and it's a hyena, and the piece is really about trying to subvert the narrative that is really accepted, which is that they're disgusting, dirty, evil, cowardly, crazy scavengers. But the truth is far more complex than that. And so the piece is really about trying to ask those questions, trying to get the viewer to ask those questions.
Okay, so that's where we have the hyena head, and then it looks like a massive lace collar around it.
Right. Yes.
It's not this evil scavenger thing.
Yeah, it's not. It's yeah, exactly. So I've made this this hand embroidered lace collar. Well, it's on organdy fabric, and it's very clean and white, and so instantly it's kind of not what you expect from a hyena, which should be filthy and covered in blood, right? But
right.
It's not. And the title of the piece is The Provider, because hyena society is very strongly matriarchal. The main alpha female is the head of the pack, and everything that they do is about providing for their family, like we all do. Like every living thing wants to provide for their children, right? And the hyena is no different. And actually it's human life encroaching always on other species, that causes conflict.
Right. Yeah. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about this whole appreciation for nature and the impact that man is having on it, and very little of it positive.
Absolutely.
And your art speaks to that.
Mm. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers. It's that, I really try more and more just the art to just be an inquiry. It's just I want to ask the questions. I don't have the answers. I don't know, how we resolve the situation that we're in,
Yeah.
But I want people to ask questions. I want people to ask the questions, and I want people to try and think of what the answer might be, and to maybe think differently.
Yeah, well, isn't that giant first step anyway? Is ask the questions. Why? What's going on? Yeah.
And to be open, and I think that is what art's power is that art has the power to like nothing else to engage you on an emotional level, and I think that people don't care about things unless they feel emotion.
Yes.
So I feel that if always what I would be trying to do is connect the viewer to an emotion in themselves when they look at my art, that can make them feel something that could then make them make a choice or a decision or a different choice in their life that might help the environment. And that sounds a bit cliche or a bit, I don't know, grand maybe, but that is honestly that's the highest hope that I have, because I think that nothing else other than art can have that effect on you.
Well, yeah, because there's always that emotional element. Yes.
Exactly.
No question. Talk to me. I got to make sure we don't run out of time, because I want to learn about some of these pieces.
Sure.
So one that I so enjoyed watching evolve was the Benediction from the Old World.
Yes.
and how you put that together. So
okay.
Please tell me the story.
Yeah, so Benedict, as I like to call him for short, I have as I said, with my sketchbooks, I really usually just keep massive long lists of species that I could do, because there's unfortunately no end of inspiration of species out there that are threatened. So I kind of have this endless pool of species that I can draw. And there's a photographer that I love called, oh God, now I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's a Danish photographer, wildlife photographer, and he takes fabulous all of the pictures he takes are amazing, but he has the series of these golden snub-nosed monkeys that he took, and I just loved them. And this particular monkey is, highly endangered, and one of the reasons it's endangered is that it only lives on these the lichen that grow on these very old growth trees in China. And the trees are being cut down for agriculture, for logging, whatever. Mm-hmm. And, so it's the classic tale really of the habitat becomes less and less, becomes destroyed. And all of the animals that depend on this habitat, therefore, become more and more and more vulnerable. But I can't really explain it any more than I just had this inspiration that this monkey was going to be this big, full kind of life-size piece, and I wanted to use fringe. I just wanted to represent the coat that they have, this golden coat that they have, with fringe. And so I just went on eBay and just bought loads of upholstery fringe. And I had never worked with it before, but I was like, oh, like everything I've done, I'll just give it a try, and I'm sure it'll be fine. And quite honestly, I'd done the face. I'd worked the face separately, just in kind of my usual split stitch. I use split stitch usually. It's not really silk shading. It's rougher than that, but that's usually what I do for any kind of large piece of embroidery. And I'd done the face, and I wanted the face for him to have his eyes closed. And just as this face was evolving, and I share it, my work in progress on Instagram, and just the response people were having of just, I just love him. They just loved him. They loved this face, this expression that he had. And then I pinned him to the ground fabric and kind of started pinning the the fringe around him, and I had sort of different textures of fringe, and some were kind of more fluffier than others. And I remember pinning it down and taking a photograph of it and texting it to my best friend and being like, oh my God, look at what I've done. I'm going to be famous. This is amazing. This is the best work I've ever done. It was like a real kind of breakthrough piece, in the sense of just like, oh, I'm on the right track. I just kind of saw this monkey coming through the work. Yeah. And I just thought, oh, I'm doing the right, this is great. He's great. I love him. And then, and he's just been exhibited in London for the first time. And very fond of him, very, very fond of him. I think he's going to be quite an important talisman for me for the future years, because he's very beloved.
Well, I mean, it's not something you can see and just move on from. You have to stop.
Thank you.
I mean, you really do. And I was interested in 3 elements. You mentioned about the closed eyes, and then the 2 fingers up,
yes,
and then the halo. Mm-hmm. And
so
what were the choices there?
Pretty much all of the work that I did a series of work in 2017, which was the Extinct Icon series, and all of those, there were 6 pieces, and they were all extinct animals, and I depicted them all with kind of various halo motifs. And the kind of feel that the idea behind that series was about how when you Google extinct species, you tend to get these kind of top 10 style lists of like top 10 coolest extinct species or whatever. And it was just kind of an inquiry about why we choose to deify some animals and not others. And it's the same thing with, if I say to you, think of an extinct species, like most people will say dodo, but there's literally hundreds of thousands of species extinct. So why is it that we know about some and we don't know about others? So I kind of wanted to make a series of work about that. And then I sort of left that. And then this year I've really gone back to it. And I think it's just because making work about extinction and species loss is quite depressing.
I would think so, yes.
At times. And, I'm fully kind of committed to doing it. I can't imagine making work about anything else at this point, but you have to kind of take care of yourself, because you just can be just absolutely heartbreaking. And making the work is a really effective way for me to work out some of those feelings. But making the work that I've been doing this year are kind of loosely titled The Divine Among Us. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I want these pieces to get the viewer to appreciate, to spend a moment just to appreciate just how incredible life is. Mm-hmm. The diversity, the huge variety and the beauty. And the Benediction from the Old World, the reason that I posed the monkey like that, it's not really to anthropomorphize. I don't really want to make work that's cute. But it's really because, so the benediction obviously is a blessing. Right. And the monkey is blessing you. And he's blessing you from the old world, which is obviously from a Eurocentric point of view of discovering the new world, and then the old world, which is China and the East and all the others. And is kind of saying that I want you to notice me, I want you to protect me, I want you to love me, and so I deified him. I've made him a holy monkey, a divine being, because for me, I truly feel that nature is divine. Mm-hmm. And I mean that literally. I think God is in nature. And so if that is true, then we have a divine responsibility as well to truly love and care for everything that's on this planet.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. No. Talk about the emancipator. That is
The emancipator.
That is one
yes.
strange thing.
How strange? Why strange?
I have studied it
Yeah.
more than once, and it just intrigues me to no end, because you have that, it was an ornue or gold work.
Yeah, gold passing.
Yeah, and this bird, vulture, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And then this elaborate coat, and
yeah,
I can't piece together what that all says to me.
So the Emancipator is a piece. It's a vulture. All species of vulture are critically endangered, and that particular species is the red-headed vulture, which is an Indian vulture. And the vulture, again, it's a scavenger, and the accepted narrative about scavengers generally in popular culture or just in between people is a certain, morbidity, a fear that there's, death there's associated, evil. These are all kind of themes around the narrative, the sort of stories that we have around vultures. But the truth is that vultures have a holy purpose. A vulture's stomach is a true dead end against pathogens like anthrax, plague, you name it. The vulture can consume it and imbibe, and it's a dead end for those pathogens. The reason the fact that vultures now though are so critically endangered means that carcasses of cows, for example, in India, because the cow is holy, and cows die, they just die. They just die. And without as many vultures, these carcasses rot, and human-borne pathogens can proliferate and be passed on to human populations, and also encourage other scavengers like rats and wild dogs, which can pass rabies onto humans. So without getting into it, I mean, they're fascinating creatures, so I'd encourage any listeners interested to kind of look them up. But the point of the piece is that, this is an incredible animal that's evolved over millions of years to be able to perform this function, and it's a holy function that benefits humankind. And I kind of was interested in this portraiture style of it's kind of medieval portraits. I wanted this portrait to be quite imposing and to maybe look quite dark, because that is what we commonly would associate with a corpse-eating animal. It eats corpses.
Yes.
And I had at one point thought maybe I'll call it the necromancer. But I was like, no, because that is kind of playing into the idea of the negative associations that we might have. The reason for calling it the Emancipator came from the burial customs, the practice of excarnation in Parsi culture in India and in other parts of the world, where the corpse is laid out and for birds to eat, or for animals to eat, for scavengers to eat. And by doing that, the belief is that the vulture has a holy purpose in liberating the soul from the body, the Emancipator. And now they are so scarce that these ancient holy burial customs, funerary customs, I should say, can't go on. They can't continue.
Because we don't have this natural element. Yes.
We don't have that natural element. So we have, forced that to such a point where there's not enough, and now corpses laid out won't be eaten quickly enough. And so that can't happen because of disease. So, it's really, I kind of want to start working more in that vein as well as sort of drawing those threads together. Excuse the pun. Drawing the threads together of how human lives and human culture and human society is impacted by the loss of these species. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think I know we don't appreciate that. Before I started doing Fiber Talk, I did 5 years of a podcast about marine aquariums, because a friend of mine and I were part of that community of growing coral in aquariums,
Right.
marine fish and coral. And of course, if you get involved in that at all, you quickly become keenly aware of the role of the ocean and coral reefs in life. You know, you talk about the vulture being missing and the impact it has. The way we're destroying reefs, I don't think we even fully will ever appreciate the damage we're doing because of the role that they play and have played for millions of years.
Sure.
And so that really, as we did podcasts, really became kind of an ongoing theme in the shows and in the people we talked to, and we'd talk to divers and explorers and all of, you know, these reefs need to be protected for the same reason. The impact, there's no destroying them. There is no positive, that comes out of it.
No, and you know, we will literally choke. They provide so much oxygen.
Yes.
The fact that that's not headline news is like, why?
Right.
So as you know, can join the list of millions of things that should be headline news.
So very
we should
true.
be caring more about. But
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
The extent that you go to, and I'm going to make up a term here, to create artistic realism in these animals, you clearly study the coloration, the anatomy, because you really achieve. Artistic realism is the phrase that's in my head about this. In that it clearly is, you know, there's a clear, definite connection with reality, but then there's that artistic element. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's funny because you're saying that, and I was like, I don't know if I don't think I ever made a conscious choice to want to do something so representative. I'm not trying to be a photographer, you know. I'm not trying to make this look exactly like the real thing. It kind of has crept in. Then I made the piece, the Moon Age Daydream piece of the alligator, and that was kind of a complete departure. And I had such a good time making that.
Yeah, I believe you did. That one looked like fun to me. Yes.
Yeah, and I definitely think I can do both. And I think, again, like part of being an artist, you do it forever, and you sort of always have this conflict of sort of trying to loosen your hand up a bit, trying to loosen your style up a bit, and have things represent other things, and it doesn't all have to be exactly, you know, realistic. But with that one, I just knew I didn't want to do a grey brown crocodile alligator. So I was like, what do I want to do? I want to do it in like sunset velvet and just, you know, get all the gold out and just make this beautiful, shining, godlike alligator. It was great fun.
Yeah, well, successful there. There's nothing drab or boring about that alligator. Nope, not at all. Talk about your process. How, when you, in these days, choose an animal, what is your process? Is it a sketch? You just haul out a bunch of thread and figure out what you think it'll look like? How do you go about all this?
So I like to do a lot of research, because that's where I find the thing that the message, the narrative that I want to express comes through the research. So like I said, like for example with the vulture, finding out all of how significant it is in a whole ecosystem and in a culture, just was so inspirational to me that I wanted to try and represent the gravity of that character in the portrait by making him very sort of impressive. And so it starts with the research, and then I will usually do a very rough compositional sketch of kind of how I envisage the final piece to look. And then very quickly, you really just move on to sort of what the construction is. So I guess this is where the sort of self-teaching about constructing textile art comes in, because as you know, it's going to be about what's first. So what's the element you've got to create first, because you're going to build on top of it, and it's not a painting, you can't paint over it. I mean, you can pull stuff out, but who wants to do that? So, you know, am I going to work this part separately and then attach it? And also now I'm working in bigger and bigger scale. I'm thinking about tension, and I don't want my fabric to warp. So I'm thinking about how heavy my fabric is going to be and how elements are going to weight it down, and you know, so it's quite a lot of things going on. Then usually I have tried this year to sort of get in better into the discipline of actually doing a sort of watercolor sketch, which I find actually is very, very helpful because it helps me make the decisions of what colors to use in my threads, and it stops me from then sitting for hours on the floor of my studio pulling all the colors out and thinking, is this the color of a vulture? Is this the color of a vulture? I don't know. So I tend to make those decisions now on a sketchbook, and that is actually really helpful for me because I am impatient and I do want to get on with the stitching. I'm not really interested in making a flat drawing, but I've made myself do it, and I think it's better for me. And then really it'll just be whatever method I think is best to transfer the initial portrait, and I usually start with the head, and the face and the features, and yeah. Apart from the hyena, I did it straight onto the canvas, and that was fine. But I think because it was fur, and I haven't really done fur before, I knew I wanted to do quite long stitches, and doing it as a separate piece and then transferring it meant I would have still had to work on it quite a lot on the canvas, so I just did it straight on the canvas. And the other thing that I do a lot now that I work more at scale is I think of it more as like an underpainting with fabric. So I'll do like an applique fabric underpainting with the block colours. There's clear pictures of that, of my hyena. When I did the facial portrait, I kind of cut out all the shapes of the face in different, and I just get all my fabric stores out and cut things out, and it's a bit of a block painting by numbers sort of, like an underpainting. And I find that again is really helpful as I'm then embroidering on the top of it. I know where the lines are, and I can just get into a flow of embroidery, surface embroidery, knowing where the shadows are, knowing where the main blocks of color changes. That's the process.
Work on a slate frame most of the time?
Yeah, now I do pretty much always. I mean, if I'm doing a portrait, a face separately, I'll do that on a hoop still. But yeah, I've now got it's a meter long slate frame. I kind of would like to go bigger, but then I just don't think I could. It would just hurt my body too much, I think, to try and work. So I'm trying to. I'm starting to think maybe I'm going to just not have to think of things being hanging on the wall, not even in a frame. I might even have to start making big things without even being in a frame. Yeah. Maybe that's next.
Yeah, big slate frames got to be, at some point, just unwieldy.
That's it. And, I have a bit of a personal boundary that I don't compromise my health. Mm-hmm. And I've had, I have gone through, as I'm sure many listeners will sympathize, the shoulder pain and the neck pain, and having to incorporate exercises into my life, shoulder and back exercises and strengthening exercises into my life, a special cushion, a special chair, a raised up slate frame, all of these things. The more hours I spend doing this work, the more care I have to take of my body. I'm a bit of an evangelist about it when I see people making beautiful work and they're really like, I'm just like, oh my, please, can you stop? Please, can you think about how you're going to ruin yourself? You're going to ruin yourself. You're not going to be able to because I intend to do this forever. Yeah. So I can't risk my body. Yeah, I don't think that gets appreciated. You really have to make that conscious effort, especially if you're going to do it for hours on end. Yeah. And because we read often people saying, I want to stitch for 4 or 5 hours, but my hands won't let me do it. My arms won't. And, it comes from years and years of improper support, improper ergonomics. Yeah. It's too bad. Yeah. Now, you've addressed, it was interesting to me, because the problem, as you mentioned, with embroidery work is it takes so long. And to make money off of it, you have to have the right person who's willing to pay the kind of money it should get. But then now you have gone to making prints and selling prints. So how did that come to be? Because that's an excellent solution for this kind of work. Yeah, I don't know if it is. I
Oh,
don't sell that well, Gary.
oh,
So
really? Oh,
basically,
oh,
yeah,
I'm
well, no,
sorry.
no, don't be sorry at all. No, basically, so I had a solo show a couple of years ago, and the gallerist said to me, "Look, I think you should get some prints done. We can sell them with your solo show." And I'd never done anything like that before, and she was very kind, and she kind of introduced me to she's an artist herself, and she introduced me to the printmaker. And the one thing that was the best thing about that was that they were able to professionally photograph the work. Now, I'm not a good photographer. I'm not interested. I don't have the camera or the conditions. I'm not interested in spending time like taking really, really brilliant photographs. So I was really happy to pay somebody to do that for me. And then the price that they were charging was discounted if you had prints made. So I was like, this is great. I can get this work photographed and I can get the prints done at the same time. And I did sell a few of them. The thing is, though, I know, and I've had prints done recently. Prints of the Benediction from the old world sold really, really well. I've still got some left. And I've got a few of the others as well. And the prints are beautiful. I mean, it really was worth getting an expert photographer to light it and photograph it, and because they are the richest, most detailed. You can see every stitch. I mean, it's beautiful. The conflict that I have is that I think if you're appreciating the work as a piece of art and the medium is kind of incidental, great, then the print is going to work for you. Mm-hmm. If you are appreciating the art because you love the medium, then it's a print. It's not an original piece of textile art.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it's just, I don't know. Currently, I'm not sure whether it's the audience that I have or the people that have seen that I have prints aren't interested or they're not aware. I don't know. For me, it's about trying to make the work a bit more accessible. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very, very clear that you must price your work properly.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart to see. I mean, I was at an exhibition recently, a group show that my work was in, and the spectrum of pricing that the other artists had, it was all embroidery, all different kinds. The spectrum of pricing was really interesting to me. We had things that were being priced for thousands of pounds and things that had been priced for the same as I pay for a haircut. And I remember, and I was saying, that is just not right. You cannot. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat meowing in the background.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's your cat's name?
Sorry.
Because
she's called Tulu. She's called Tulu, and she needs to shut up. Shush. She wants attention. And it was just that really hurts me because I think it hurts all artists.
Yes.
I think that when you, especially in a forum like embroidery, which can be so easily, even today, devalued and discarded as somehow not as worthy, somehow not as high art as painting, for example.
I hate that term. I just
what term? Which term?
High art.
High art. Yeah.
Spare me.
I find it really, because I think that when you start to say, my work is I'm pricing my work at the same value as a haircut or a train ticket, what then you can't be paying, you just can't be valuing it. It's just, so I think that for me to make things like the prints, it's making it more accessible. It's offering a version of the work.
Yeah, that whole pricing thing is a real issue. And I used to do an incredible amount of photography and not so much anymore. But, there's an art form that has changed dramatically now that everybody has a phone in their camera.
Right.
And, everybody thinks they're a photographer. And to get a print or get it posted online is nothing anymore.
Absolutely.
And yet they're not photographers. They're just picture takers. Mm-hmm. And yet the people who have paid the price are the true artists, the true photographic artists, such as the ones that you use. they can no longer command, or very few of them can command the kind of pricing that they need for their art. And it's a real fallout of technology that is too bad. And and then you get into that whole thing, that high art. If it isn't an oil painting, it doesn't count. Well, exactly. Yes, it does. It's just a different medium. And
it does, and that's again, and that is why I think when you price original art so low, it just feeds into that misconception,
right,
that it isn't of value, that it isn't as of high value. And if it's art, it's art. It has that same value. It's the same.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a real problem, but it's a problem that's been around forever. I mean, it's not a new thing. Yeah. No. But it's just frustrating because, especially today, with the threads and techniques that we know and have, and the kind of work that you do, and to create true art, true textile art, then that should get the same respect that a good oil painting or a good watercolor or a good sculpture. Why not? But it's so, and then that old, well, that's woman's work. Well, no.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it, because that's exactly part of it. I think it can be seen as, it's domestic.
Yes.
So, and it's women's work and it's craft. And me saying that is not to malign craft in any way, but that is it's used in a derogatory way.
Right.
To kind of separate textiles often from art world. And I've seen there are some artists out there who have, high gallery representation, and they're at the big art fairs, and it's going really well for them, and they work in textiles. And that is the work that I think it's being shown as transcending its medium.
Yes.
So it's a constant dialogue inside of kind of where it sits, but I do think, for me, as I said, it's authentic for me to say that I work in this medium because it's just the medium that I've always have worked in. I've not made a conscious choice, and that's not to say that's a good or bad thing. It's just, for me, that's just what's true for me. I didn't make a conscious choice to paint or to sculpt or to use textiles. I didn't have a formal art education where I was exposed to those kind of mediums and to make a choice. If I had, maybe it would be a different story. So it's not that if I say it's irrelevant, I don't mean that in any way derogatory. I adore embroidery.
Yeah.
And I follow, if I'm on Instagram, I'm following embroidery artists. I'm not really, I'm some painters, but it's embroidery. That's what I love. But when it comes to it's a piece of art and it's for sale, it's irrelevant that it's embroidery.
Yes, should be, yes.
Apart from the joy and the ability that textiles has, I think, especially hand embroidery, to draw you in. And this is the feedback that you get when you exhibit embroidery, and that's what I love to do. I make work for exhibition, is because when people come to an exhibition of embroidery, it's a different experience. It's a whole nother level of, art should make you feel something, and you look at, you've got that, but then you also then get drawn into it. You end up with this very intimate relationship between the viewer and the piece when it's embroidery, because they're like, look at the work. Mm-hmm. You can see every single, you can see every brushstroke maybe, but you can see every thread, every stitch. You have a physical representation of the time. You can account for it,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's really special. In embroidery, and I think that's why the fact that it's embroidery should be part of its value, and not, it should be of it and apart from it.
Yeah. What's that exhibition thing like? Is that nerve-wracking, exciting, both?
Both, I'd say. I never know what to do with myself at a private view. I turn up there and then I'm just rubbish, and I'm rubbish at networking, and I'm rubbish in general public situations. I was at one recently, and I was literally stood next to my piece. It was the Emancipator. It was the vulture, and there was these two women. And my phone was buzzing because they were tagging me on it as they were there, like, oh, this piece is amazing. And I'm just standing there looking at my husband being like, oh my God, look at this. I can't, not, hello, I'm Katie. How do you do? Nice to meet you. It's really a weird situation for me because I'm just not good at that kind of thing. I wish I was better. It's part of every job. There's part of every job that people don't like, I guess. But it's part of it. I do need to get better at it. But
it's hard to do.
It's hard to do.
I relate to you. It really is hard to do. Yeah.
I'd much prefer just being in the studio, making
leave me
the
alone.
work. Yeah, just let me make the work, and then you just
Yeah.
I need a rich patron. That's what I need.
Is that what it is? That's how it works?
I need a patron, some sort of rich patron to just basically pay me to just invest in my work now and in the future, like they did in Van Gogh's time.
I'm making a note here. Get a rich patron. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a catalog of them somewhere.
I'm sure there are. Just waiting.
Kate, really a treat to talk to you. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Same here. Really have. And many more questions, which means we have to have you back. That's the way it is.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Love to be back. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for listening.